It's space weather! Looking at the solar disk on 193 angstroms. We've got an active region rising. Another active region trailing that. We have a coronal hole wind stream from this rotating out coronal hole that's arrived at Earth. And a new magnetospheric connection with the other side of the heliospheric current sheet. It has just occurred. The magnetometer reflects that. Here's the view in 304 angstroms. It's got a full screen. Big plasma filament on the southeast looping around. Lots of filaments on the western limb. Let that play through. There you have that. Let's look at the magnetic looping associated with 171 angstroms. You can see quite a bit of activity on the eastern side. Also some filamentary dancing going on down here at the bottom where we saw that big loop. Let's watch that play through on the entire thing. See all these filaments on the surface here. Lots of filamentary activity around the western limb. Complex magnetic fields reflected. Complex magnetic fields reflected in the images. Speaking of magnetic fields, here's the magnetogram. It looks like that giant active region is moving toward the equator, which makes perfect sense. Let's look at the magnetic lines. And they are fully anomalous. Ignore that, as that is magnetic fields masking other magnetic fields. Next, let's take a look at the Gong 2 PFSS model data. You can see this orange line here. This orange line. It's going to leap across over to this area. And it's in the process of doing that now. And the data reflects it. So let's have a look. So looking at the solar wind, you can see there is a significant signal in the phi angle there. These various, what you'd call sputtering connections. And then this signal here around 135 degrees. Also the BT-BZ is really jumping around. And if we see this BZ drop into the negative, if we see it come way down like it is here, that's an increased earthquake risk. Also, the coronal hole is an increased earthquake risk. So the magnetic connection, the KP index is going to come up. It already is 4 last we checked. We do have an increase in wind speed because we're hitting that new sheet of plasma, and that's what's doing the magnetic connection. Solar wind density 8.67 protons per cubic centimeter. Solar wind speed up to 559 kilometers per second, which is indeed high enough to cause some geomagnetic instability. Let's look at spaceweathernews.com. See a small X-ray flux there. Again, not approaching the B range or anything like that. Probably out of that active region. We're seeing a major convergence here in the BT-BZ. And that's associated with earthquakes. By the way, the BT component is the total energy coming out of the solar wind, and the Z component is the angle on the Z plane. So you think of an X and a Y plane. Here's your X and your Y plane. The z-plane is the three-dimensional field that comes out of the poles, and the z-angle is, if it's at 0, you got an equal pull from each pole, and if it's at, negative 15, it's heavily to the south. If it's at positive 15, it's heavily to the north. Quick explanation on the BT-BZ angle. BT is the total, that's the white line on the ACE and the black line on the Discover, and Z is the Z angle. Again, your Cartesian coordinate system, you've got your X component and your Y component. The Z component is the three-dimensional plane where, you have, here's the sun. You got these fields that come out of the poles. That's the association with the Z angle. In other words, the energy coming out of the sun is highly tilted sometimes, and that's reflected in the BT-BZ. Hope that helped everybody who doesn't understand the BT-BZ. It's a little three-dimensional to comprehend, and we'll cover that in a little more in depth at a later time. Now, here's your magnetometer spike. This is when leaving one portion of the heliospheric current sheet. This is the rift, and this is the reconnection happening to the other side of the heliospheric current sheet. Basically the new sheet, opposite polarity. You can see up at the top there, these crossed, and they came dropping down. That's in between the rift of the two different parts of the heliospheric current sheet. And now the new sheet looks more powerful, so this new range, we're probably going to see higher highs and lower lows on the magnetometer. That's the best guess, but keeping an eye on that. That increased solar wind speed and other perturbations have brought the KP index up to 4, which we would call unstable magnetosphere. Here's your signets. We'll let that play through, although this is going to become less and less relevant over time, as this is a prediction. And it doesn't look like it's changed much in the past couple days. Moving on. Now we see a major drop in the electron flux. That is always, well, not always, but that's typically associated with coronal hole wind streams. And also the crossing of the heliospheric current sheet is probably what this is. Again, we said it was happening throughout the day yesterday, and it's in the process of completing its new connection. We've got some charging hazards, especially around Central America. Not too extreme, and those should come down as the electron flux is so low. F2 layer is looking a little anomalous, and that's no surprise. This discharge portion is extending very far south. However, it's not as discharged as it's been in the past, so that's really not too big of a deal. The increased solar wind has caused major auroras in the north. So if you're in places like southern Canada, get out there and look up. Also, the southern aurora australis is also significantly charged. Heading to quakes.globalincidentmap.com, and by the way, we leave all the links below. Go back 8 hours. We see a 4.4 in Japan at depth. Japan should stay on alert for a 5. El Salvador gets a 4.3. Iceland gets a 4.7. They've been calm for a while, so the uptick there. El Salvador gets a 4.8. And another 4.8. And those are about an hour apart, 40 minutes apart. Indonesia gets a 5.8, which is, I believe, the largest quake that we've recently had. China gets a 4.5. Basically a lull in major earthquakes. Moving on. Let's look at the geospace magnetosphere movies, as we're experiencing major changes in the magnetosphere associated with those magnetic connections. Here's your velocity. Let that play through. Here's your density. Probably the least telling of all three of these movies, by the way, is the density. And lastly, the pressure. Much higher than it's been in previous days, and for that, we thank you. Let's let that play through one more time. And let's look at some cosmic ray sources. We'll leave links to this also, as we do to everything. Some of these links are dead, but it's still a great source for cosmic ray sites. Here's the Athens Neutron Monitor. Looks like we had a little spike right around midnight. Not as high as it was a couple of days ago, and now the levels should be dropping back down. Check out Mexico City. Looks similar. Go to Oulu. Actually, go to Moscow first. Moscow at a lower level than 2 days ago also. And let's take a look at Oulu. Also not as high as yesterday. And let's take a look at a 1 week long view of where the planets are and where they'll be. Here's where they are currently. Saturn is nearly at opposition. Let's play through 7 days. Happy New Year! So, Saturn opposition is approaching, for those of you who find it relevant. And that's not to say we don't find it relevant. We just want to look at the data when it happens. Now, go to phys.org, see an interesting article here. Lightning's electromagnetic fields may have protective properties. However, the page cannot be found. We searched for it. This is phys.org's own article, so we can't find it. We assume we're talking about electromagnetic shielding from, I don't know, other electromagnetic fields. Not exactly sure what they mean. If anybody can find that story, let us know, because we can't find it. Next, we do have another source of very high energy gamma ray emission detected in the neighborhood of supernova remnant G24.7 plus 0.6. Another catchy name. Thanks, astronomers. Anyway, we used a ground-based radio telescope, which is measuring really high energy levels. We'll leave links to the article. The source is about 16,300 light years away. And we're measuring energy levels from, I don't know, 150 giga electron volts up to 5 tera electron volts. Interesting article. They're blaming proton-to-proton collisions, and we have no argument there. Let's look at pre-opening stock market situation. Dow Jones futures and NASDAQ futures are all expected to open up. Also the S&P. So small futures increases expected. David Rosenberg suggesting the Fed will be cutting rates in coming months. And as a listener of Peter Schiff, we wouldn't be surprised if the Fed cut rates, or at least stopped raising rates. As the possibility of stagflation looms, global demand seems to be dropping. Oil prices are at an incredibly low level. And let me just make another note here. Silver. For those of you who've been watching us for the past months and months, we were telling you to buy this at $14 an ounce. Last Christmas of 2017, we were buying this for people at over $16 an ounce. This is still a buy. It will remain a buy. When the stock market goes down, physical commodities, beans, bullets, Band-Aids, silver, gold, lighters, rice, all that sort of stuff. Looking at currency, dollar lost some ground. And it looks like world markets are higher also. Lastly, let's look at Facebook, who unbanned us as promised on the 26th. Oh, Facebook, here's your 1 month chart. Geez, it looks like you weren't doing very good when you had us banned. Not saying it's a cause and effect relationship, but hey, how about a little correlation, folks? Geez, look at that, the 26th, they just bounced right back. Oh, that's what happens, Facebook. Sometimes you ban people and they don't take very kindly. Anyway, here's the 1 year chart. Tech stocks? I think not. By the way, I used to be a tech stock specialist. In 1999, just before the NASDAQ bubble burst, I was trading tech stocks every day. And guess what? When the NASDAQ bubble burst, my portfolio went up. Let's take one more look at the Gong 2, and this time we'll do so at the line of sight ecliptic plane. So, the green magnetic field lines, those are the current sheet that we're going to be leaving, or are currently left in the process of reconnecting to the red fields here, associated with the south solar pole. And the blue line is the average. You can see that was being pulled down by that active region, which is my theory on the delay of the connection. New connection will be very strong, so we'll be keeping an eye on that magnetometer. Let's close things out at 171 angstroms. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Try and help us get to 1,000 subscribers if you feel the need to. It's been a slow slog since we got to 700. So in any case, we'll be covering it daily. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you have not already done so. We thank you for tuning in. Remember, on your way crossing the heliospheric current sheet, don't drink. And if you drink, you're crossing anyway. So don't drive. Seriously, don't drive.